very creepy occurrence happened a few weeks back, but I'll start off with introducing myself a little. I am 16, female, and my boyfriend is 19, and we are living in the United Kingdom. A few weeks back, I was staying in Norfolk, visiting family with my mom, brother, and boyfriend. My grandma, who I was visiting, lives in a small housing estate surrounded by deep, creepy forests. One evening, me and my boyfriend got quite bored, as there's not really much to do around that area, so we decided to take a walk in one of the forests, not expecting to discover what we did. We walked around the housing estate until we eventually came across an entrance to one of the forests, and without hesitating, we walked through, having to duck underneath the bushes. We stood there and examined the area while we rolled a cigarette. It was quite open with some bushy areas and a lot of really tall trees. In fact, it didn't really seem creepy at all at this point. It was just beginning to get dark, so it was still slightly lit. We walked around the forest, smoking our cigarettes, just talking about random stuff until it actually did get dark. But it still didn't seem creepy. We carried on walking until we came across a bushy area with a very small opening, barely noticeable in fact. And of course, curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to go and explore. Yeah, great idea, I know. Exploring a deep, creepy forest that I've never been to at night. But, nevertheless, we walked through this little opening anyway, having to avoid branches, stinging nettles, and thorn bushes. But for some reason, we carried on anyway. After following this trail for about 5 minutes, we came across what looked like a campsite. What the hell is that? I wondered, so we walked over to investigate. There was a large old curtain stretched across, and each corner was tied to a tree. However, on top of the curtain, there was a pile of dried up leaves, which suggested no one had been there for a couple of days, but it didn't look abandoned. There was also a big white sheet that was tied up to the trees to create a bit more shelter. Inside, we found huge amounts of pillows, coverlets, and cushions, as if someone had been staying here for quite a while. There was also a girl's bag, which consisted of a half-full can of deodorant, a load of girls' clothes. Yes, we are very curious, and it didn't look like anyone was around, so we had a look inside the bag. Inside the shelter, there was also girls' clothes, scattered all around the camp as if they had been staying there for quite a long time, and a flashlight, which still worked, which was just sat on the duvet. Beside this sheltered area was a large blue and white bike, which had a plastic bag wrapped around the seat. At this point, we just assumed that it was a squatter camping out in the woods, and nothing suspicious at all. We're not very easily creeped out, and we're pretty chilled out most of the time, so we really didn't think much of it. We carried on walking for a bit, and we next came across an old mossy garden chair and a random fold-out bed with a compartment underneath. Again, being the nosy people we are, my boyfriend lifted up the mattress, which was surprisingly very heavy. It made a horrible, piercing, loud creak and slammed down, so we just decided to leave it. Now, by this point, it was practically pitch black, but we didn't want to go back, so we just continued walking. We were probably only walking for another 2 minutes or so before ending up at a suspicious-looking pile of dirt, as if it had recently been filled in. My boyfriend decided it would be a good idea to try and dig it up a little with a stone that he had found nearby, as that was all he had. Yeah, again, great idea, I know. So he began digging, not really knowing what we were expecting to find, if anything. After digging for quite a while, he pulled out what looked like a bit of a tattered old scarf or jumper. This is when we didn't feel quite right, as if maybe we really shouldn't be here. I stood around watching out into the forest, not able to see much. Suddenly, we heard that horrible creaking from the fold-out bed, and shivers ran up my spine. I froze in shock, and I looked at my boyfriend, who had also stopped what he was doing. Now, like I mentioned, I hardly ever feel creeped out, but I suddenly got a really bad feeling about this. A really weird vibe. I started to feel really sick, as if we were being watched, and I wanted to get the hell out of there. We decided that it was time, so we walked further on, into the bushes, trying to find a way out. I still felt like we were being followed, and I felt really creeped out. which worried me even more as I'm not easily scared. We carried on walking and came across an old rusty shovel just propped up against a tree. It was quite some distance away from the loose mud. However, my boyfriend really wanted to go back with the shovel, and for some unexplained reason, we did. Once we were back there, he began to dig as I held his phone that we were using as a flashlight. I was constantly looking around and still feeling really uncomfortable. However, all I could see was faint silhouettes of the bushes and the trees in the darkness. I was convincing him that we should go, as I really felt like we were just not alone. And I wanted to listen to my gut feeling, which was telling me to get the hell out of there right now. Then we heard twigs snapping and what sounded like footsteps. And that's when we decided to leave. He threw the shovel onto the floor, and we ran through these bushes, jumping through the nettles. All we gave a crap about was getting out of there as soon as possible. I don't think I ever ran so quickly, trying to avoid the low branches. And after what seemed like hours, we eventually jumped through the bush into the open area of trees again. We carried on running for a little bit and saw a dog walker, so we felt as if we were safe and reassured. We continued to walk through the woods, talking about what had just happened, thinking it was over, but we came across a tree, and spray painted onto the tree was this: "I set my friend on fire." The paint was still dripping down. This was just messed up. We came across many more trees, which also had eerie things spray painted onto them, such as, "Do you still want to kiss me in the rain?" And a lot of them said, "I will always love you," and "kiss me." This may not have been related to the previous experience, however, but it was very suspicious, and it just seemed strange, and I had a feeling that it was tied to what we saw. We decided to get the hell out of that place, and we never wanted to go back again. When we got home, we discovered a photo on my boyfriend's phone, which we never took. It looked like a very old frame of an armchair. It was so rusty and covered in moss. And in the background, there is what looks like an alien kind of shaped figure. Now, neither me nor my boyfriend even remember seeing this armchair, let alone taking a photo of it. So this was very creepy. I will send the picture as an attachment. I apologize for it being blurry. We decided to not think or talk about what happened again, but we decided to share this story with you, Midnight Fears. It made me shiver just writing about it and remembering what happened, as it was one of the worst experiences, and I have never felt like that before. Thank you, Midnight Fears. Beth and I had a week away from Beth's family's summer home last August. It's taken me a while to talk about this because, well, listen to my story and you decide. We were wanting to do something romantic and remote. We booked a ferry to take us north to an island fishing town. On the way, I used my phone to look up some cottages we could rent. One was called Night Swim Inn. "Here, I'll get us this one," I said, trying to show Beth the listing. But the page stalled and looked like it was loading. "Oh," I said, my voice trailing off. We were already kind of remote, and I figured we just had bad reception. I closed the window and I opened it up again, and the screen read, "Booked." "Got it," I said. This place looked awesome. Restaurants, the beach, a boardwalk. "Shared bathroom?" Beth said. "I don't trust these listings people put up on themselves." "Oh, come on, that just means we share a bathroom. I've seen these bad spots before. I'll believe it when I see it." I pressed her just a little bit. "Babe, we're going on a romantic getaway. Even if it's not as advertised, that's part of the fun." "Not as advertised?" Beth said. Indeed, when we arrived at our cottage, cars were whipping by at breakneck speed, and the sound of the nearby ocean was swallowed by grisly and grueling engines. There were no restaurants, and very few other people. We certainly had our cottage to ourselves, but we were separated by the water, by a good 300 feet of thick shrubs. A cab had driven us about an hour from the nearest town to get us there, and his overhead light was now fading into the distance. There was definitely no going back, unless we paid another couple $100 for another ride. We looked around. All the other cottages looked like they had been abandoned, but you could see the outlines of figures sitting just inside the windows. "What the hell?" Beth said. "It's like we're stuck inside a Stephen King book." I reached into my pocket and felt for the little velvet box I had been keeping secretly. No matter what, I was going to surprise Beth by the end of this. We stepped inside our tiny cottage and noticed there was a tiny back porch. The sun was beating down overhead, and Beth decided to do some sunbathing. I coated her back with sunscreen, and she laid down flat on her stomach. I quickly plugged in my phone into our only outlet when I heard a voice. "Watch out for that sun. It'll rip the skin right off you." Beth responded with a shaking voice. I only do a little bit." I walked over to the back porch and I saw a man who looked like he was over 90 years old, leaning over the porch railing. "Hi, sir," I said, but he cut me off. "Who the hell are you? There are too many guests here all the time," he said sharply. Then, without saying another word, he just walked away. Beth was terrified, and she wanted to leave. I put my hand into my pocket. All I needed was one quick walk by the water under the moonlight to show her the diamond ring. I was able to calm her down, but she squeezed my hand so tight at that moment, I thought she was going to break my hand. That night, as we prepared to go for a quick walk, we started to hear what sounded like chopping or banging from the nearest cottage. This was followed by a short burst of yelling, and we could tell it was the man from earlier. The lights were on in both levels of his house, but as soon as we looked, the screaming subsided and all the lights shut off. "Weird old guy, huh?" I said. I wasn't going to let this freak ruin our moment. Down on the beach, everything was peaceful. Beth and I exchanged words about how happy we were together, and I reached for my pocket. At that moment, someone walked up to us. It was a young man, about our age. "Hey, who are you guys?" the man asked. I couldn't help but notice that he was wearing what looked like the old man's clothes from earlier. "I'm Charlie, and this is my girlfriend Beth," I said. I could tell Beth was uneasy. "Can we help you?" For a moment, I could have sworn his eye drooped, but it was so dark I couldn't tell. No, the man said. "The moon is so much more forgiving, huh? Not like the heat of day. See you later." The man kept walking. When he was a safe distance away, Beth grabbed my arm. "These people are terrifying. Can we please leave tomorrow?" She was so distraught, and that man had ruined the moment. "Sure," I said. The diamond would have to wait for another time. The strange thing is, that's all I remember. I woke up the next morning on the couch, facing up. I still had my clothes on, and the diamond was still in my pocket. "Beth! Beth!" I called out, but she was nowhere to be seen. I ran around the entire cottage, down by the water, and across the boardwalk. Nothing. I finally ran over to the other cottage where the man had come from. I banged on the door repeatedly, but there was no answer. Angry, I kicked the door down and walked inside. No one was there. In fact, the house was empty, except for a few pieces of furniture. There was no food, and the lights wouldn't even turn on. "Beth! Beth!" I shouted, but heard nothing except for the sound of my own voice. Only a few minutes passed since I had woken up. I called the police, and after about an hour of worrying myself sick on the back porch, 2 police officers finally arrived. They looked around and found nothing either, and asked for me to fill out a missing persons report. Then I saw it. From the corner of my eye, I could see the other police officer talking to someone at the door of the other cottage. A woman. I ran over, and it was Beth. But it wasn't quite her. The body was all wrong. It looked like her, but her eyes were stretched, and her chin protruded. Her hands were all contorted, and her neck looked stretched back. "I've got nothing for you," the woman said to the police officer in rather low voice. "Okay, sorry to bother you," the police officer said, turning away. With the officer's back turned, the woman stared at me sharply, with the same devilish eyes from the day before. I knew it was her. I knew he had harmed her, and every guest that had come before, but I couldn't prove or say a thing. Who would believe me? I never saw Beth again, and I never even got to show her how much I loved her.